Welcome to the Ordinals Podcast, produced by Ord Media, featuring the top builders, projects, and investors pioneering Bitcoin inscription protocols and the future of digital artifacts.
Welcome, everyone, to the Ordinals Podcast. Every story has a beginning, and Ordinals definitely has a beginning. Very happy to be joined today with Charlie Spears. Charlie was there early, and not just early, but deeply involved with the core team and the guys and girls really developing the software, making big decisions. And I think enough time has passed since the beginning that now Charlie and others have some perspective and context for what happened in the first few early months, but it's still fresh in his mind. And so we really appreciate Charlie being here. And Charlie, so welcome to the Ordinals Podcast.
Glad to be here, Ragnar. I love to see all the different people doing content, insight, and building on Ordinals. 9 months ago, I think this was still just a dream, something that Casey and his friends thought was a cool idea, that maybe there'd be a couple dozen more people interested in it. And now that there's hundreds of thousands of people, and that I, as full-time Ordinals now, can barely keep up. So yeah, crazy to see this. Glad to be here.
Appreciate that. And as I see it, the early days have a few aspects. First, there's pioneers. There's those early pioneers taking the big risks, going out on a limb. They're often sometimes semi-eccentric. I mean, to be doing weird, niche, innovative, risky things requires a certain type of personality, I think. So we can talk about pioneers. I would say uncertainty is another one. It's always easier to look back after something, but in the time you don't know how certain it was, and often it feels very, very uncertain. Another element we can talk about is kind of early alliances, and I don't want to say enemies, but maybe opposition, just kind of some early things that people came together in a good way. We could focus on the positive. Another kind of aspect of an early story is Another aspect of early stories is consequential choices. So often early decisions lead to outcomes and consequences that sort of last for a very long time. And then two more things is colorful characters. There's often very interesting personalities in the early days of a story. And finally, history is often rewritten. So we want to get it on record on a podcast with Charlie Spears. So Charlie, first thing, when did you first come across Ordinals?
I had first seen the word ordinal, I think, in fall of 2022, because I had actually been following Casey and Aaron's podcast, Tell Money Podcast, and I had actually found it because I was a little bit more interested in Aaron, because I think I saw this, weirdly enough, through TikTok or something. It's a very unconventional way for a Bitcoiner to like learn new things, but I didn't really pay much attention to it until I'm a Bitcoin miner as well, so I had a little bit more free time in December and January because the markets cooled off, and I was like, oh, maybe I should pick up on this one podcast and listen to it a bit more. And then I saw Dennis Porto's newsletter on Ordinals in mid-January, and that's when I hopped in the Discord that Casey and Raph were using to pair program, and that is how I just kind of jumped in and started looking at this new thing right as Casey released the Ord 0.4.0 client. And then probably 2 weeks later, it really kind of jumped into the public consciousness with the Taproot Wizard. But it all happened so fast, and that is actually how I found out about it. I could probably talk way more about it, but that's like a big picture timeline.
Okay, so kind of fall of 2022 podcast, Aaron, Casey, something involving TikTok is there.
Aaron had a TikTok, and she talked about like off-grid lifestyles. Nobody knows this, which is crazy. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. She's on this podcast, and that led me to Hell Money Podcast, which I thought was really interesting. I really like people who have novel ways of viewing and talking about Bitcoin, and that is Casey. Casey is a person who thinks very differently, And if you've been in Bitcoin as long as I have, I hunger after novel perspectives, and this is one of the most novel perspectives, and that's why I really like it. It took me a little while to wrap my head around, but once I wrapped my head around, I realized this is something I'm fine committing full time to, and here we are today.
So the dates for you, again, that was fall 2022, and then January when you jumped in to the Discord and got involved
Yeah,
there.
and
So for the
I
dates.
really hadn't looked at ordinals until January. I'd seen it and I'd seen the word, but I really only kind of started looking at it and reading through Casey's blog and description of what it is and how it works. Only in like right after hopping in the Discord, now called the Ordicord, and that is where I had a crash course on it only a couple weeks before everybody else. But it's a constant learning thing. I mean, I think even now 6 to 7 months out, I'm still learning a lot of the core parts of it, and how the Ord client works. But then really by extension, a lot of just how Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin itself works. I think a lot of people don't understand that to understand ordinals and to really understand like where like the things that that explores about Bitcoin are unconventional ways of viewing Bitcoin, which means we have to learn. A lot of us have to get better at really understanding how Bitcoin itself works. That's what gets me so excited. Been in this space many years, and I'm still learning things about how Bitcoin itself works.
I love hearing that. It's so refreshing. And Ordinals has done that to a lot of us. It's kind of reinvigorated what we're learning and relearning the basics that we might have forgotten. And so for you, I mean, it is pretty niche. And Aaron and Casey's podcast was niche. Dennis Porteau is his own flavor of things, right? He has a strong voice and strong opinions. So for you, I mean, what is your background that this was in kind of your even sphere of things? I know you said you've been in Bitcoin for a while, mining side, but kind of tell the audience briefly kind of where you would even be in a place to even come across this kind of niche content and ideas.
Yeah, I've been in Bitcoin for a really long time. It's a little over a decade now, actually. And my wife and I run a Bitcoin meetup here in Oklahoma. About half a decade ago, after the block size war, which is a very difficult time to be a dumb young Bitcoiner, I began to really wrap my head around Bitcoin mining, and I started a Bitcoin mining company. My partners and I are from the oil and gas industry, so we started working to deploy Bitcoin mines on natural gas wells here in Oklahoma to varying degrees of success. So we've done a bit of that. That partnership and company's name is Nakamoto, and so I've always been fascinated by the business of block production, and this and just I also have a healthy appreciation for Bitcoin narrative and how new ideas come into Bitcoin and how I can break existing mental models that I have about Bitcoin. So I'm constantly searching for new things. I like to begin from the perspective that I'm probably wrong about everything, so I need to go learn more about it. And so through that and that kind of mindset and this interest in the business of how Bitcoin blocks are produced, I got interested in ordinals because it has deep implications for how for data on Bitcoin, for information, as Casey's purpose was for art. And so I think just natural curiosity, and then also the kind of weird other X factor is my wife and I haven't texted in many years. We only use Discord and Slack. So I'm like Discord native. So it happened to be that as this week is kind of it, I've been hoping that Bitcoiners would move from Telegram to Discord, and it just so happened that because of the nature of the platform that Casey was on, I happen to be well positioned to already understand and already just be native to this platform. As 20,000 people flooded into this Ordicord, I found that I was like, oh, I'm like the only person who understands how this works, and I have some free time, so over the past spring, I realized that I would like to try to figure out how I can build in this business long term, and that's why I'm now with Luxor on the Ordinals side of that business. So yeah, that's that's kind of the mindset where I came from and how I got here.
So in summary, kind of your background and what led you to this was obviously being in Bitcoin for a long time, and then mining, and then good old Discord. So
Yeah.
you and I, we're not developers, but I think we're technical enough to understand things. You probably more than me as owning, a mining company and doing mining
Hmm.
type things. But that's interesting. So let's start then in January.
Yeah.
Let's go through the cast of characters. There's Casey, there's
Yeah.
Raphael,
Hmm.
and then who else is there?
Well, there were many people, and Ordinali is one of the more notable ones. Ordinali, very Ordinali on Twitter. He's one of the core folks leading the dev side of the Ordinals repo today. There's actually a number of people, and I need to be cautious because not all of them, I understand, want to be closely or formally associated. Because really, Casey had been proselytizing or talking about ordinal theory for the previous year. And he'd kind of assembled a group of friends who got it, who were technically minded, who were enthusiastic about this idea into kind of a recurring, like, stand up hangout session as he and Raf and various people who had worked on the development side kind of actively built this on this idea with really not much like long-term plan for or long-term concrete plan for here's how we're going to go to market or anything. It would really truly is an open protocol at its core. And so there were various people. Raf and Ordinali, Casey's had worked with Liam in the previous fall. He speaks very highly of Liam as a developer. There are other people who've been on Casey's podcast. Isabel, who for a while was Casey's kind of marketing publicity person. I need to be
Yeah, it's okay. I mean,
thoughtful.
there's
If you look on the order cord and you see who has the team role, that would be a good indicator of like various folks who are close friends with Casey, and that's kind of like a short list of people who uh, were interested very early on.
Yeah, that works. And there's a lot of people who like to protect their privacy or who
Yeah,
just aren't people who are want to be social that much and just want to do the work, right? And so
yeah,
anything, so Charlie's only going to share what he's comfortable with. He keeps really good confidences. So we're always erring on the side of privacy and deference. And so we'll only discuss things that I think everyone's comfortable with
yeah.
knowing. But good insights. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who have who work on under pseudonyms. Who this has been a nights and weekends thing, and that's kind of the story here. This is a bunch of people kind of capturing Casey's idea. Like myself, I'm one of the few people who's like fully doxed and like at least early on like fully associated with like I'm going to help try to manage the community side of this. But there's a lot of people, and maybe over the years as Ordinals continues on, we'll have more clarity or public commentary on here's some cool ideas that these people shared early on. But it's just so cool. I feel like almost like an insider from like the early Bitcoin days as Bitcoin Core is being developed, because it's it's delicate, the path dependency of this open protocol. And we see this today. Like it there was a period where if it's been no secret that Casey really has not been super public the past few months, deciding to work mainly on just communication through the GitHub, the Ordinals GitHub, where she's appointed Raf as maintainer of. And we can see that it's the same mind that comes up with this crazy out from left field idea of Ordinals may not be the same person who leads like a giant open source protocol movement. These are different sides of the brain. I like to say Casey is more of a creative than he is a developer, but he is one of the sharpest developers. So, I think about like, in another universe, there may be a more closed source Ordinals protocol, and I'm really glad I live in this one where it's open and free to everybody.
Good comments. So going back to a lot of people don't know that, yeah, this is being developed for a while, that Casey it just didn't spring up out of nowhere in December. He's been working on this for quite a while, been sharing it with some people informally, kind of a small but open group, it sounds like, from my understanding. And I've been following Casey, I don't know, a couple of years. He's been following me on Twitter. He likes that I like guns, I think. I don't know where he stands on guns, but he likes that I like guns for some
He likes
reason.
you, so
Okay.
therefore, yeah.
Good
Yeah.
enough. So we've been following each other, and he had messaged me about it, and then I actually pitched him on Trajan, which is my startup, having him join as CTO. Obviously, he didn't do that. I'm glad he didn't. And but in December of last year, 2022, he messaged me and said, "Hey, Ordinals is on its way now, and you should use this for Trajan." And he gave me a brief summary. But that was it. Like, I wasn't as smart as other people where I got it and I believed in it. But I did understand that Casey was smart. He was out of the box thinker. So I knew something might have been there. But for me, I couldn't see the applicability. It seemed like it was just sort of a nerd experiment, like numbers. Like, I'm so bad at math. It's my worst subject in college. My only like C+ I've ever had in school was in math. And so for me, I didn't quite grasp that part. But obviously in January is where I really started to see it coming. So going back to January of 2023 of this year, you were a Discord expert. You came across it in Discord with Casey and Raf. And then what happened? You were reading about it. And then when did you become kind of an admin, or when did they say, "Hey, you look like you're a glutton for punishment. How would you like to help run this monster?"
Yeah. So I was kind of I would almost say like emergency appointed admin because nobody who had the kind of agency or time or familiarity with Discord, and I happened to give, I was like, I don't really have anything to do during February. I'm fine taking over this responsibility. But it was a bit under duress because there were like a couple dozen people on this Discord, and maybe 5 or 6 of us would be talking about ordinals, and then that went from a couple dozen to thousands in a matter of 2 weeks, and everybody had the same question. And so it was just kind of like, "Charlie, you seem like a reliable guy," and so they made me admin, and I kind of took a lead on that. And not many of the other people associated were super active in kind of what I would call it community education and maintenance. They're more focused on trying to keep the wheels in the bus of the protocol itself. And so I found myself as unofficial kind of liaison and community guide, and it just gets me really excited because I have always found the culture of NFTs fascinating. I'm different than your mainstream hardcore Bitcoiner on that, and then I thought these are really cool. I've had a love for the community aspect of it, and for me to see that come to Bitcoin with all of its benefits and problems gets me excited. So I quickly tapped a handful of people, some anonymous, just totally by intuition, and some people that I know personally, my wife and Cypher particularly. But then I had asked Paz and Post Capone and Satoshi to all help administrate the server or moderate the server. And just kind of through that, it began a month or two of nonstop, literally 24/7 community education. It was a period. It felt like the early days of Bitcoin, really, as everyone's throwing new ideas out there and having really invigorating, novel discussions about the future of Bitcoin. And I kind of found myself kind of like the ringleader of this crazy circus. I made a couple of YouTube videos because I was like, oh, I mean, these folks aren't going to read as they should. They're not going to read the documentation. They're the NFT folks are much more visual and audio oriented. They're not reading or long form written learners. So I was like, okay, I mean, I'll just make a couple of YouTube videos. There are much better YouTube videos out there now, but at least I was like, I'll just be the first out the gate. And it meant that I fielded most of the inbound inquiry early on. I'm glad to redirect most of that to smarter people as the questions get more sophisticated and technical now. But I lean on smart people like Satoshi, Post, Cypher, and then internally at Luxor, I lean on. We have a really good dev team, and kind of led by our very technical founder, Nick. So
Mhm.
like that, this is where I haven't really had a chance to reflect how I got here, because every single day I just respond to the innumerable like fires that I have to put out. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's how the early days looked.
I like it. So let's stay on that vein of January in Discord. So there's
Hmm.
Discord, public Discord, where people are commenting and everyone can see what's going on. And there's of course the behind the scenes, behind the Discord, behind Ordicord. And so without hurting any confidences or sharing any information that no one would ever want to share, maybe we can talk about what you can share about like behind the scenes, what it was like. I
Yeah,
imagine it was busy, but what can you share just kind of behind the scenes when you guys are trading DMs about this and that? Anything you feel comfortable sharing?
yeah. So a lot because there was not like this coherent like go to market strategy. Um, it was a lot of the kind of close friends or extended community around Casey who had been actively involved in this for months, even before me, specifically Raf and Ordinali and Aaron, and who are to this day like I would call the core Ordinals team. um, and us and various other people would have like daily stand-ups where we would talk about what happened, because every 24 hours there were innumerable new things which had happened. And um so because I think a lot of people don't realize that like while when Casey launched the Ord client 0.4.0, it was ready to go, but like there were so many things which have yet to be developed, like even stuff that we're only just getting to today, like documentation, parent child, um reinscription, recursion. These are things which had been delayed because we had, Casey and the team had to respond to tons of media inquiry, community education. So yeah, January and February we would have daily stand-ups. We'd be in constant communication, debugging, trying to figure out if this one issue that this person encountered broke everything. This was a regular occurrence. It'd be like, oh shit, like this one person did a non-standard transaction. What does this mean? Did the client break? Did it not? Thankfully, I'm kind of surprised the wheels stayed very much on the bus, um, even through today.
And what do you
So
attribute that to? Because all the chaos, the pressure of the media, the pressure of
yeah.
people's, oh, this is an emergency because of my transaction, and then
Hmm.
just trying to like develop the basic protocol. I mean,
Yeah.
what
I
allowed
think
that?
it speaks to Casey and the various people who helped develop the client itself. Um, Casey has a very deep understanding of how Bitcoin Core works. Um, he really this is, as Cypher says, a love letter of Casey's to Bitcoin. So this was done from a Bitcoiner mindset. And so when you do that and you take time to make sure that you're not just releasing something willy-nilly out into the wild, Casey had thought of many of the edge cases. And he and Raf and Liam and Ordinali and the various other people who had touched the code itself um, are very smart technical folks. And so they built the Ord client very well. Now, it's been vastly improved since then, and various people have forked it, and we run our indexers, and at Luxor we built our own indexer, which our own client, which basically is the same thing as Gourd, but it's our own. Like, but early on, that client and the kind of way of maintaining that client was very much stress tested, and it succeeded. Um, it really is. It really speaks to the previous year's worth of development that Casey and the folks who were closely associated with him spent putting time and development effort into it.
So
And
despite the, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, that's really why. It's not because of anything we did post release. It really is because of everything that was done pre-release, when Ordinals was not a main narrative. Before I had joined, I simply kind of joined to help shepherd this into the broader public eye.
Okay. Okay. So despite the pressure, despite the varying interest, despite the chaos of Discord and early days, the bus has stayed on the, excuse me, the wheel stayed on the bus, as you said,
Yeah,
because Casey and the team had designed the client well, thoughtful, good developers, tested it, knew what they were doing as much as you can on something like this. So they were just a good group of developers who did a good job with the
yeah,
software. And if it wasn't, they laid a good foundation, and software is never finished, right? And so that's
never
very
finished. Yeah,
interesting. So that's on the software side that Ordinals didn't completely break. It's had some hiccups, but it didn't completely fall apart. And so that's kind of on the coding side. Now on the social side, I'm curious how things happen there. Anything you could share or not share, but full confidence is here. What can you share, like on the social side of how staying positive? What allowed people to work together under such extreme circumstances? Because I've been under extreme circumstances, and it is very, very hard, especially when you're torn in 10 different ways.
yeah. I think it was kind of an accident and very fortuitous. A lot of us who were involved very early happened to have a lot of free time in the months of January, February, and March, and we many of us happen to be in similar life situations. This will get a little personal, but like me and Cypher and other people like Paz or Post Capone or Satoshi, a lot of the people who are very active on the Order Cord, um, we were kind of looking for something at the time. If a lot of people forget that like December and January were the darkest, like deepest depths of a bear market. It was a sentiment low. I've been through several bear markets now, and they all suck, but like this one particularly sucked. And um, during these periods, I mean, a lot of Bitcoiners like to say, "Oh, it's time to build. Oh, stack stats and stay humble," which is true. But like, the reality is that even if you have DCA'd for a long time, and you're familiar with this, this cyclical part of Bitcoin, it is still hard. And so a lot of us found ourselves sitting on our hands looking for something to be excited about. And that is why so many of us had time to volunteer above and beyond even simply a demanding job. And that's where a lot of the community leaders who are now have like full-time professional jobs in the space, that's where a lot of us just found that we got our energy. And my view is that from a community management and shepherding standpoint, the most important thing is that you want to do it, and then all the other problems can usually be addressed. Um, and so when you have the wind at your back, as you do with endless community interest, it gives me life to help people set up Bitcoin full nodes. And that is like what we were doing every single day. There were days when when me and Cypher and Post and Satoshi would help more people install a full node and run a full node that day than I had in my entire career as a Bitcoiner. And like that kind of thing uh, means that lack of sleep, stretched sanity, those things become more tolerable. And that's why, yeah. And then with Casey, the thing is like, Casey is an uncompromising Bitcoiner. And so it's very clear that he has a particular vision and thing that he wants to communicate. And with that kind of knowledge, the rest of us, even those of us who don't talk directly to Casey, I mean, Casey only talks to a handful of people, really. Um, those of us who like Post Capone, right? He does not. He's not on the direct like line to Casey, but he can see how Casey communicates publicly, um, and understand how he should communicate about the protocol. And when you have a clear direction and a clear focus from the guy who started it all, everyone else can kind of fall in line and figure out, well, here's how we respond to a bad actor, or here's how we treat blockchains that are not Bitcoin. Here's how we treat bad actors in the space, because there's a lot of bad actors. The thing is, even in the first couple weeks, there are people seeking to sabotage or co-opt parts of this narrative. People looking for a quick buck and a quick flip. And the thing is, if you were there early, if you were there in the first week of January or last week of January, February, you weren't there in order to make money. You were there because you were interested in the protocol. And so that lift carried a lot of us through this period of like having to navigate some very challenging social situations where there are people coming in trying to scam people or impersonate people or like muddy the waters. Um, One of the things is that Bitcoin has made certain design decisions with regards to like block size increase. And one of the big narratives early on was, there are other blockchains which have done different things, forks of Bitcoin. And people from those other blockchains say, man, we could make inscription so much better if we just increase the block size. And you could do that. You can try to fork Bitcoin, but a lot of us are like, you have done that. You have forked Bitcoin. And if you want to go build on that thesis, you should go to that other chain and continue that. We believe the market has clearly determined that the design decisions that Bitcoin has made as a network are the correct ones. And so it really helps to have like even broad cohesion about these things. And this really speaks to the strength of the Bitcoin narrative and network. Even when a lot of the hardcore Bitcoiners were very critical of ordinals, I think those of us who love Bitcoin can still identify and sift through which of the main like components of Bitcoin's nature are worth preserving and still feel aligned with this network that we love.
Well, you covered a lot of ground there, so I want to go back and hit a few of those points specifically. So first summary, and then we'll dive back into it. So the first thing you talked about was the opportunity and the fact that a lot of people had some free time. They just simply had some free time, and we can talk about that. The other one was the bear market. And so it was in a bear market where people also had free time and maybe the eyes were off. The other thing you pointed out was Casey just being kind of a strong personality with a clear vision. He kind of set a tone where like, hey, this is sort of how we do things. You could argue or for and against, but there was a clear sort of path that this is sort of what this is and how we do this. And then finally you hit upon kind of the block size and some early challenges that you face without, getting too in the muck of it and trying to stay positive. But there was that kind of that issue and kind of people from that side of things. So let's start from the first one then, free time. So I like what you said, like, oh, these bear markets are the time to build. And I'm like you, I've been through the bear markets. I thought 2014 was a painful one, but this one felt bad. And I think it was because it was everything happening at once. FTX blew up, and you just go down the line, the banking crisis, and it's just like one thing after another. It wasn't just a typical hype cycle. This was like real existential stuff, I felt like. And I have some free time as well. And so it was interesting that it actually took a bear market probably to really allow a few people to have the time to do this. Because if it was a raging bull market, everyone's busy, who wants to do this thing, whatever. So it was actually one of those examples where the bear market helped create ordinals. So that's the one thing I want to make sure everyone understands. And also just on a personal side, Charlie, like, when I hear people say, oh, build in the bear market, those are VCs who aren't cutting checks.
Yeah.
And so it's easy for people to say that, right? When you're not cutting any checks, but telling people to do the work. And also I want to hit on that too, that you guys weren't paid. I mean, you guys had some free time in your life for whatever reason, and you're doing all this hard work and people are demanding, why aren't you guys doing this? How did that feel to be in that moment of you're like, hey, I'm not getting paid for this crap? Like, how'd you deal with that? What did other people feel? Did you guys talk about that?
No, I don't think anyone really wanted to be paid at the beginning. Casey had offered it, and my wife did from April through May act as like a paid community Discord moderator. And for a couple weeks in March, I also got compensated because I was like, I need to devote full time to this and I need to take away from other business activity. But like, almost every single person is entirely uncompensated at doing more than like a full-time job of work.
And hard work too, what you guys were doing. It wasn't just fun stuff. And I wonder what the pressure was like for you guys doing that and dealing with demands.
Yeah, it's like, I think, you say that it's the VCs or people who don't have to, it's often people who don't have to actually build who say build in a bear market. And because I want to say, like, yeah, it was a sentiment low. I thought we were past all this in November and December and January. I was like, finally, maybe perhaps institutional corruption doesn't extend all the way down, but like I think we certainly explored new levels of like uh, you know being disenfranchised or disillusioned with the way a lot of people in supposedly respectable positions conduct themselves. So yeah, like capital's hard to access. So like we couldn't build new mines. That's where I was. We'd build a bunch of mines. They're going great, but like new stuff was pretty much at a standstill. Um, I think this was the case across the space. You can only work for free for so long, and it takes money to go work for stuff. And then as the bear market draws down, money and available time to deploy to that becomes very tight. And so, Cypher talked about this. He worked for a kind of a GameFi company that on a different blockchain, and he had actually left that because he didn't agree with a lot of the principles of that. And I think a lot of people were like me and Cypher, where we're like, we don't have a lot. We either aren't enthusiastic about what we were doing, or our hands are tied because we can't put some of the pieces together for the things that we want to do. And then here comes along this new fresh idea, and our existing skill sets, our existing knowledge about Bitcoin, and our passion for open source projects aligns very well. And you have a giant new cohort, thousands of people coming in who know nothing about Bitcoin, and they're hungry for it. And you're there having spent years studying this blockchain that we call Bitcoin, and you can educate people. I've run a Bitcoin meetup for half a decade now, and there's a certain way of communicating about it and kind of in-person community building, but it's not scalable beyond like your personality in a room. The world of online education is pretty much infinitely scalable. You make a YouTube video, and instead of reaching 50 people in a room that you have to like shake hands and like spend time with, you can like put that on the internet, and that gets tens of thousands of people watching it. And so it's like a very different kind of asymmetric way of education. Now, when it comes to like hand holding and walking people through like technical challenges of running Bitcoin Core, of installing Ord, then it gets like to that person like time demanding time sync thing. But like it's just so cool when everyone around you, a lot of people, I think back to when Satoshi launched Bitcoin. That was in the depths of the financial crisis. You see a lot of the best ideas come at sentiment lows. It really is kind of this phoenix rising from the ashes story. So I don't know if in 2 or to 10 years we'll be talking about ordinals. I think we will, but these down markets and disillusionment, peak despair is also peak opportunity.
I like that. I like that a lot. Peak despair is peak opportunity. So to the listeners, I want to like re-emphasize this, that you guys were doing a lot of the hard work, still doing hard work, but at the time, a lot of were just unpaid, taking a break from the business, taking a break from a job, whatever it might be, yet still doing this hard work. And I think people should kind of remember that when they're thinking about these things. And the other thing I think is how different people came together. Right. So you have a set of skills. Cypher has a set of skills. Casey has your wife has a set of skills, right? Aaron has a set of skills.
Yeah.
Raph has so these kind of ragtag group of people who just love Bitcoin. That's what I would say. You guys just love Bitcoin. I love Bitcoin. Sort of it's just the passion, I think, pushed you through January, February, and even to this day, right? This passion for Bitcoin, this passion for teaching, this passion for ordinals. And that cannot be replicated from a top-down closed source corporate company, even a startup where there's often really positive energy. I mean, this was an open source thing, but still that passion is what I think drove you guys, and love of Bitcoin. And same with me, I love Bitcoin, but boy, the last couple of years, it was like I don't know, 7-year itch marriage, but with Bitcoin. I was just kind
Yeah.
of like, and I got into stacks and I love stacks, but it's so great to see things come to Bitcoin. I wanted to ask you about, and this is a fun topic, is money. And again, we're always sharing what we can share publicly and not, but people saw a lot of money to be made. People
Yeah.
saw NFTs and Ethereum, and boy, was that, I never got in Ethereum NFTs ever, never, just was never part of any other blockchain besides Bitcoin, and then later Monero, and then later Stacks. So what was your opinion, or what can you share about kind of seeing people who saw, hey, this is a great financial opportunity, which is good, right? Because that brings development dollars, that brings users, that brings new resources, that brings lots of good things. But from a perspective of like working long hours for free out of passion, and people who are using the code, your guys' hard work to make big dollars, honestly, dishonestly, depending on who it was, how did that feel? How did that feel to the rest of the team? Whatever you can share.
Yeah, there were a few early actors who I have spoken about negatively, and some of them have changed their behavior and some have not. I applaud people who take criticism well, and I I still have strong words for people who I think are extractive and not good actors. But this is the way. I think this becomes kind of a psychological thing, because this is always, if you look at this, like, this is how Bitcoin's always been. You have very selfless Bitcoin core developers who work for pennies, and you have very selfless protocol engineers, even on other blockchains, who are just excited about building stuff. And there's not always a lot of reward for selfless building and brilliance. And I think you just have to be okay with the reality that this is going to happen. I think that we should learn, though, to be able to take our pound of flesh sometimes. And you can be patient and humble with how you do that. But also, eventually, you do have to like learn through trial and error that people are going to swarm in, and they're going to suck all the air out of the room, and they're going to build businesses which are misaligned. And I think you just have to be okay and content with the fact that, well, I'm not in this for money, but I would like to provide for myself and my family. So I'm going to learn how to get that carrot on the end of the stick sometimes. And in my case, I have managed to marry my enthusiasm for Bitcoin with Luxor, where I think this hits a bunch of like really broad competencies, and it's a company that I'm really aligned with, that I love. But like, yeah, I think that it's nothing new. I think if you want to be in this business for more than one cycle, you're gonna find that quick and dirty extractive business models do not sustain. You can make a quick buck, but it's probably going to come at the cost of, say, social acceptance and reputation. And I just have strong confidence that I'm not going to be perfect, but if I can be principled in how I act and learn from my mistakes, that I can have a multi-decade career in Bitcoin. And I think a lot of us can learn from that. And I think I can, with patience, prudence, and principles, I can, me and my wife can figure out how to make money and do what we love. Sometimes they don't align perfectly, but they, on the long timeline, they really have. I've been able to do business that I think also drives the dreams that I have.
I appreciate that. And so part of it is just accepting the fact that people are opportunists and extractive. I think that is the great word, Charlie, is extractive. And that's just the reality. And same thing in Bitcoin, right? You've seen it come and go. And that's one reason why I'm so passionate about trading, because reputation to me matters so much. And I've made many mistakes, and I've made good decisions too. And over the years, I just have come to admire people who have built a good reputation, and I see how far that's taken them. And then I've seen how good reputations are ruined, right? We saw FTX, that ruined forever a lot of reputations. And some of those people are never coming back, and some I hope do. And so that's why, to me, like, these early days, why I like talking about this with you, is it really shows reputation, and the people who were there in the first few months doing all this work under pressure, which you guys were, and still to this day, but especially the first few months, I think that has cemented a reputation that despite mistakes a lot of people will still make. I mean, you're imperfect, Casey's imperfect. You cannot deny the reputation that was laid down in those early months. And so even though we talk about ordinals being data forever on the blockchain, well, I think so too for this history and the story of the early days, and that can never be denied, right? And so that's why I love talking about the subject with you and these people that you've worked with.
Yeah, I strongly agree. I think about like why I do anything, and it's if I were in Bitcoin only for monetary gain, I would have given up a long time ago. Often the enthusiasm of just being well aligned with Bitcoin does historically produce wealth. But you can't only see the carrot. You can, because it's not easy. You don't sustain through these sentiment bottoms as we did this past winter without having something else there that drives you. And so and in those times it really is like it's like the crypto refrain that we're all going to make it, or it's the friends you make along the way. Like that is pretty true. Like those Bitcoin meetups in Oklahoma that we run, like those December, January, February meetups are some of the most visceral, like, and encouraging ones, because we're all there, we're still showing up, and maybe we drank a few too many beers at the top, and we're drinking just as few too many beers at the bottom, but that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, is building this crazy blockchain alongside other people, and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I've put on a couple of meetups myself, and then seeing the attendance go up and down is always a fun one. I want to talk about kind of helping core devs, and because you hit on something that I believe in too, which is a lot of times it's the smartest people doing the hardest work getting paid the least. And when you hear about how a lot of how much money the core devs make, it's shocking, often very shocking, and it's often shocking that they can't even raise some money. So your experience with this team, and then just being in Bitcoin for a long time, if someone loves ordinals, what can they do to help, the people working at the core protocol level?
Yeah, this is still very early and emergent, and the way it's going to look, I think, is going to evolve over the coming months and year or two. But a pretty easy one is you can donate to the Ordinals core team. That goes to a multi-sig that Ordinali, Raf, Aaron, and Casey control. I think they're good stewards of that money. I strongly endorse that personally. But
And
I
where's
think
that? Sorry, Charlie,
that's
where is
on
that located?
docs.ordinals.com. You can see the donation link.
Okay.
I think they'll be good stewards, and they'll put that money to good use. I think there are also other people, private and non and public, or private and not for profit groups. So I think it's good to be prudent and research who is building what. And so Lux is a private company, but we're trying to build products and tooling that is in the best interest of the ecosystem. So as the protocol develops and is trying to figure out, well, what does, say, parent-child provenance look like? What does reinscription look like? These are like protocol decisions where people will not have the same view. And what matters right now is that we have good processes for discussing these. I think this is the next kind of challenge that we as a community face. So how do we where do we have these conversations? How do we encourage good actors to participate in those conversations? How do we reduce the bad actors sucking all the air out of the room? Luckily, the space is small enough from a protocol and technical level that most everybody knows each other and has a good, like, familial relationship. And a lot of us will talk specifically about who we do and who we do like. And so the mutual respect, I would encourage anybody listening to this who wonders, like, who was Charlie talking about? I would go listen to, I will talk to people on Twitter. I'll be on Twitter Spaces. I'll be on podcasts. And I say, I really like Raph. I really like Ordinali. I really like Casey. I really like my coworker Cyfor. But there's a bunch of other people. And so you can kind of build a trust network in your head of like who talks to who endorses whom. But we're going to have to figure out how we go forwards. Cyfor did a interesting talk that I have pinned or that I have linked somewhere on my Twitter profile about, it was at Bitcoin Plus Plus in Austin, about like an Ordinals improvement protocol process or an OIP process, kind of like a Bitcoin improvement proposal process. I think this is something like that is going to be important to figure out how to develop. And so we're just going to have to figure out how this goes. I don't know the best way to do this, but I think if people are talking about it and talking about it in good faith, we have the luxury. We have a period where there's still not as much on the line as there could be, and it's still open enough, and relationships are still strong and professional enough that we can have some foundational positive discussions on this type of thing.
Yeah, that's good. And I'm glad that you came to the Ordinals 2023 conference. You were a panelist, obviously, Cyfor, your buddy Cyfor. We missed Post Capone, couldn't make it. And then, of course, Aaron moderated the panel. And then we had our hackathon, which you guys really helped out. So I'm sorry I didn't thank you earlier in the show for doing that. That was a big thing. And that's one reason why we put together the conference, was for this, to forge bonds of friendship, to let people meet face to face. There was one or two people there that we had blocked each other on Twitter for years, and over some very acrimonious reasons, like not just some usual Twitter drama, but like some real solid reasons. And yet I was able to speak to one or two of those people, and that really helped out. So I think, and you appreciate this because you've been running a meetup for a long time in Oklahoma. And so I've, again, put on conferences, I've seen the power of people meeting in person, looking each other in the eye, talking, grabbing a beer. And so I hope there's more meetups, I hope there's more conferences. I think that really helps grease the wheels a lot of times, and kind of helps reduce the social friction, increase the bonds. And so that's something I'm dedicating myself to. And I'm glad you're continuing doing your meetup with the rest of the team.
I strongly agree. A lot of the ideologies that we differ on can be smoothed over, or maybe not resolved, but improved or forward movement on can be discovered in the in-person relational conference. And it's harder to look somebody in the eye and like actually hate them than it is to look somebody in their profile picture and disagree.
Absolutely. And I think people should keep that in mind, that there's real people behind all this. And one side comment I would say to help the developers is they actually do welcome comments on GitHub. Me as an entrepreneur, I've commented on several GitHub issues. Casey's responded, a few other people have responded. And I think they do appreciate people like saying, hey, I tested this and it didn't work, or it worked, or what about this feature? Or me as a non-technical person, this is how I see it. So that's another way we can help the developers, is to actually get in the GitHub, comment on things, see what we can do, because that's where it all happens. So we shouldn't underestimate that as well.
Yeah. The GitHub is the official place to have these discussions. The Ordicord it's about as official as you can get, while not really being the official one. We discovered that as many of us have full-time gigs doing other things, the Ordicord kind of lives as this ongoing conversation, and the official discussion on the protocol happens on GitHub. So that's where these different platforms stand right now.
Yeah. So I urge people to go get in the actual GitHub, get in the actual Ordicord Discord, and have the conversations there. Try to be productive there. Before we close, I want to talk about Luxor. So tell me about that. So you're working away, you're working in the mining industry, you have background. Did you know Nick before? Tell people what Luxor is, what you're doing there, and how that came together, and when that came together.
Luxor is a Bitcoin mining services company, kind of everything in addition to running a pool. I'd actually known some of the kind of Luxor co-founders early on, when they were just a small team of a handful. And so I'd watched them build this company for a while. I was a fan of their research side, their ASIC trading desk, Now I'm associated with the company. I get to like see inside and get excited for the products we're building. But Luxor uh, tends to innovate. It's a small, lean um, uh, company who builds new business verticals in the mining industry, um, and very well respected, which is quite an achievement over several cycles. So I didn't know Nick super well. We'd seen each other at conferences, and then we found ourselves talking a lot about just inscriptions and ordinals early on, and through mutual interest, as he made a very public signal that Luxor wanted to like engage with the space. I saw this as an opportunity to work with and align myself with a company that I had my head wrapped around more. I knew some of the people. As a side project, I had helped Jameson build Ordinal Hub. So then Jameson took a full time gig with Luxor. He leads that, and I maintained kind of in stealth mode maintenance of this. And now I'm officially on board as well with Cyfor. And so I view Luxor's core competencies as varied across the whole space, because Ordinals doesn't just happen to be art on Bitcoin. It's rather opening Pandora's box for new things happening in Bitcoin block space. And I like being aligned with the company that can innovate on this idea. So it's not super clear, in my view, how it will play out, but I think it's pretty clear that we can execute on the future in the space. And that's what I get excited about. I feel like it's 2017 and it's post block size war, and I'm just getting into like wrapping my head around what Bitcoin mining is. And I'm like, I want to go into the business of Bitcoin mining. And I feel like that today, where I'm like, I'm wrapping my head around some of these ideas of Bitcoin block space. I want to be in this business. I want to go build on this idea. And so that's where I fit in with Luxor. Luxor, again, you want to buy an ASIC, if you want to use a pool, if you want to look at market research, if you are a Bitcoin miner and need consultation, business development, we hit all those. And firmware. I actually spent the reason I was a little bit late for this podcast is because I was helping one of the Luxor firmware guys install firmware on sites all across Oklahoma. So this is, this hits all the things I'm interested in. And so it's
congratulations.
wide blue ocean.
Congratulations. Yeah, they're a good team. And Nick, also, he was obviously a speaker panelist there. You guys were talking about mining at the conference. I think you guys got a lot of questions. Actually, so we have all the videos up of the conference, and that mining like little panel you guys did, I think was the most popular. That and the hackathon discussion.
Yeah.
Got the most views.
That's cool. That's crazy. I love that. There's very few people who have like been such a figurehead in the mining pool side of things as Nick has, and I think that'll continue. We certainly innovate and try new stuff more than anybody else. So Luxor tends to dip our toe in something, and then it kind of becomes industry standard. That's historically how it's been.
Excellent. Well, as we wind down here, I want to ask you two closing questions. The first one is, where can people find you and learn about you and communicate with you?
My personal Twitter at CB Spears. And then, that's the best place to talk. We have a Discord, Ordinal Hub, discord.gg/Ordinal Hub. That's a decent place to hop in. And then I'll see you on the Ordicord as well. Those
Charlie's
are all great
there.
places. Yeah,
Charlie's
still there. I check in, I dive in, say something, so those are all great venues. And then I just plan on being at any conference in North America related to inscriptions, ordinals, and mining. And then I'll maybe at some conferences outside of North America, depending on schedule
and budget. Okay. And then final question for you, Charlie. Do you own an inscription that you would never sell?
Yeah, I own two. One, I early on inscribed my handle, CB Spears. You can try to figure out which one that is. It's pretty obvious. And then another one, I inscribed a nice kind of love letter to my wife. Love you, Lolo Stream. Yeah. So neither of those, I don't think anyone would want to buy those. So those are easy ones to choose.
I like it. I like it. That's my question is, what will you inscribe? All right, Charlie, it's been great speaking with you. It's good to see you again, and looking forward to hoping having you back on a podcast, having you back at a conference. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Ragnar.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please rate and review our show. Subscribe to the Ordinals Podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or your favorite app, and follow us on Twitter at the OrdPod. Drop us a line at podcasts@ord.media for topics you'd like us to cover or guests you'd like us to interview. Ordinals 2024 conference is taking place in Nashville. Early bird passes are available now. Visit ord.media and sign up for our newsletter. Thanks for listening to the Ordinals Podcast, produced by Ord Media.